I think ABC is a disgrace. I think ABC should be shut out. I'd much rather do it on NBC. I'd much rather do it on CBS, frankly. I think CBS is very unfair, but the best of the group. And certainly I'd do it on Fox. I'd even do it on CNN. I thought CNN treated us very fairly the last time.
Let the debate about the debate begin. There's just a little over 2 weeks until Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are set to face off in a critical head-to-head showdown. But it now seems like there are questions if the debate will actually go down. Trump is slamming the network hosting the September event, even hinting in a Truth Social post that he may drop out. We have The Hill's congressional reporter Mychael Schnell here to talk about all of this. Mychael, let's jump right to this back and forth playing out. What's the latest? What is each side saying?
Yeah, essentially what we're seeing play out right now is the debate about the debates. It's pretty customary when you talk about presidential election cycles when they have these very high stakes primetime debates. The question right now is whether or not to keep the microphones open or not during the debate. We'll remember back during the CNN debate in June that the mics were closed when the other candidate was talking. Trump campaign wants to keep it that way. They want the microphones muted when it's not their turn to speak. The Harris campaign, though, says that they are pushing for the microphones to be left open during this event, noting that during the negotiations for parameters for the debate in June, they were not part of that because technically it was the Biden campaign and not the Harris campaign. So that's their stance right there. Former President Trump was actually asked about this earlier today. He was asked by an NBC News reporter, would you want microphones muted in the debate whenever you're not speaking? His answer was, quote, we agree to the same rules. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. The agreement was that it would be the same as it was last time. In that case, it was muted. So him right there making a push to keep the microphones muted, but also noting it doesn't happen. It doesn't matter to me. This all comes ahead of the September 10th debate. So it's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on to see how this shakes out. And again, the debate before the debates, quite a pastime in Washington.
Certainly a lot of gamemanship going on there. Now, coming out of the convention, polling continues to be favorable for Harris. She's taking a big 7-point lead nationally in a new poll just out over the weekend. What's Harris's team doing to keep this type of momentum going?
Yeah, that's going to be really one of the biggest challenges from now until November. The Harris campaign had that massive boost when the vice president ascended to the top of the ticket following President Biden stepping down. And then they continued that momentum with the selection of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. And we're seeing that be sustained last week in Chicago, where Democrats gathered for the national convention. So now the big test and the big challenge for Democrats is going to be keeping that momentum up. So the polling remains high. So fundraising continues to funnel in. So volunteers on the ground continue to want to pitch in their help. That is going to be the main challenge really for the Harris campaign, because there's about 2.5 months now until Election Day, which sounds like a lot in the grand scheme of things. But, you know, in Washington, that can go very quick, but it can also be an eternity. So it's going to really be a challenge for the Harris campaign. I suspect she's going to continue to crisscross the nation, holding different events, talking about different issues that are important to the general electorate. But definitely, you know, that is a question that is running through the minds of Harris staffers, I'm sure.
And we've seen this campaign season, basically anything can happen. Now, Harris and Walz head to the battleground state of Georgia this week, a state where Biden barely won in 2020. Democrats say they can do it again in 2024, but polls show Trump is ahead. What do Democrats think Harris at the top of the ticket will help them do in Georgia?
Yeah, well, Harris campaign co-chair Mitch Landrieu, he essentially said, quote, we really think we have a chance to win Georgia. As you mentioned, Georgia has a checkered political history. It's a place that Biden won back in 2020, but then previously had been controlled by Republicans in a few years. But Mitch Landrieu, Harris campaign, really feeling confident here that they have a chance. He said the campaign is, quote, 100% committed to carrying the state. And then he continued saying, quote, focused on Georgia. They got new energy when the vice president took over. So right there, it seems like Landrieu thinks that this momentum and enthusiasm and excitement from Harris's ascension to the top of the ticket will trickle down to various states, including Georgia. We're just going to have to see how that shakes out in November.
Switching gears here just a bit, there's an awards gala being held at Trump's New Jersey Golf Club to help pay the legal bills for people who were attacked at the Capitol on January 6th. Trump is listed as a speaker. All of this, it's drawing heavy criticism. What are Republicans saying about it?
Yeah, we haven't heard from too many Republicans about this, but I will tell you that Lindsey Graham was on the Sunday show circuits over the weekend, and he was asked about this gala and the possibility of Trump speaking there, and he completely dodged the question. It was something that he would not answer. He was pressed by CNN's Jake Tapper, and he would not give a firm answer on that. Remember, we're currently in recess, so lawmakers are a bit more difficult to get a hold of. So it's harder to press them on these issues. But Lindsey Graham, he's an interesting barometer for how Republicans would react to this, because he is, a close Trump ally. So if he is being apprehensive about answering it, it probably means that there are more folks behind the scenes who are not too thrilled with it.
All right, now this didn't take long at all. House Republicans are investigating Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, moving on from their probes on Biden. Mychael, what specifically are they looking at?
Yeah, well, one thing just overall is that we've been hearing a lot of House Republicans now talk about the Biden-Harris administration, or say Harris, and not focusing so much on Biden, which, remember, is a change, because for the past year and a half, House Republicans have been investigating the Biden administration, the Biden family finances, really every aspect in detail about the president, that all culminating in their impeachment inquiry, the report of which was released last week. Now we're seeing sort of a shift in rhetoric. We're seeing House Republicans really lean in on Vice President Kamala Harris. One of those areas is immigration. We'll remember that the Biden administration had tapped the vice president to be involved and take the lead on, immigration, the situation at the southern border area, aspects under that large umbrella. So Republicans are now turning back to that. They've called her the border czar a number of times, a title that the White House has pushed back on. So expect to hear a lot more about immigration in the lead up to the November, when we listen to criticisms from House Republicans.
And Democrats really along the way just saying this is a pointless exercise, a fishing expedition. Now back to the latest campaign headlines. RFK Jr. is out of the presidential race and has thrown his support behind Trump. He also spent part of the weekend embracing the term MAGA. We all know that's Make America Great Again on social media. What did he have to say exactly about this phrase, this MAGA movement overall?
Yeah, I'm just going to read you the quote right there, because it's interesting. He said, quote, "Make America Great Again recalls a nation brimming with vitality, with a can-do spirit, with hope and a belief in itself. It was an America that was beginning to confront its darker shadows, could acknowledge the injustice in its past and present, yet at the same time could celebrate its successes." So an interesting statement right there from RFK Jr. It's going to be really fascinating to see how the suspension of his campaign and him throwing his support behind Trump changes the dynamics in the 2024 race. RFK Jr.'s support had dwindled over previous months. He was polling at a pretty significant level for a third-party candidate, but that has since decreased. There are a lot of questions of if RFK Jr. supporters will follow Trump in endorsing him, and I think that there's some skepticism, because let's not forget, a lot of RFK Jr. supporters were folks who were disenchanted by former President Trump and President Biden beforehand, and now Vice President Kamala Harris. It was sort of seen as a protest vote, the double haters, as they were called. So I don't think that folks should jump to the conclusion that they will now follow in Trump's footsteps and they will follow in RFK Jr.'s footsteps and support Trump. There was an analysis by the New York Times over the weekend that said that Trump could benefit about 1% in battleground states across the country. Not such a high number. It could be significant in a state where the two candidates are very closely divided, but New York Times saying don't expect a large bump or boost for former President Trump with the endorsement of RFK Jr.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about this endorsement, what's happening. The Kennedy family is unloading on their brother, RFK Jr., for his endorsement of Trump. What impact will Kennedy supporting Trump have on the race? Let's talk about it a little bit more. And how does his family essentially trashing this decision play into it all?
Yeah, well, the Kennedy family criticism isn't exactly new, right? We have heard this from some family members since RFK Jr. threw his hat in the race, in the ring, since he was continuing his campaign. So this was sort of the culmination of it, with him coming out and endorsing former President Trump. The impact it'll have on the race, that aspect, probably not too much, because as I said, we've known about the family criticism for a while. It just doesn't really help the image of RFK Jr. and really doesn't help the cause of former President Trump having criticism of being targeted at somebody who just endorsed his campaign. But at the end of the day, I don't think that the family's criticism is going to play too much of a role in results come November.
All right, it's coming up quickly. The sprint towards Election Day is on. We have just 71 days until Election Day on November 5th. Mychael, you are doing solid reporting on key races to watch. What are some of the top congressional races that you're tracking?
Yeah, well, look, the House races are really important this cycle because the House is completely up for grabs, as is the Senate. They're both very closely divided. Democrats just have to pick up 4 seats, net 4 seats, in order to take control of the chamber. Republicans are, and the Democrats are confident they'll be able to achieve that. Republicans, on the other hand, are saying that they will expand their majority, which, of course, we know right now is razor thin. So I looked at 5 races where this is really going to come down to. The first one, New York's 22nd Congressional District. That's where we're seeing Congressman Brandon Williams, an incumbent Republican, being taken on by Democratic State Senator John Mannion. Another interesting race, Washington's 3rd Congressional District, where Congresswoman Marie Gluskamp Perez is up against Republican Joe Kent. Once again, this is a rematch from a race that happened in 2022 when Gluskamp Perez narrowly defeated Joe Kent. Joe Kent is endorsed by former President Trump. Next race, New York 17. This one's interesting because it's between a former congressman and a current congressman, Congressman Mondaire Jones, who was voted out of his seat back in the 2022 midterms. He's on a comeback bid for his old perch in Congress. He's trying to take out Congressman Mike Lawler, a Republican, in that race. Then there's Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District. That's where we have Congressman Matt Cartwright. He's up against, he's a Democrat, up against Republican Rob Bresnahan. And then finally, Michigan's 17th Congressional District. This is where Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin is now no longer running for the seat. She vacated the seat so she could run for Senate. So there are 2 former Michigan state senators running, Tom Barrett, a Republican, and Curtis Hurdle Jr., a Democrat. That, according to Cook Political Report, is a toss-up. So these are just 5 of several races that are very close and could determine the House majority. But nonetheless, there are a lot of races to keep an eye on because whoever wins the presidential race is going to want to have control of the House and Senate to be able to really have that trifecta and get things done, which is why these down ballot races are just so crucial come November.
Crucial and certainly close, like you said. Now, let's look at the Senate. There's another hotly contested race. We have Senator Jon Tester up for re-election in Montana, where he's fighting off GOP challenger Tim Sheehy, a retired Navy SEAL. Native American voters remain a crucial voting demographic in that state. Mychael, talk about how they are influencing this race.
Yeah, this cohort of voters, the Native American community, is expected to play a key role in this race. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And, you know, when you talk about Montana, this is going to be really key when you talk about Senate control next year. And again, the Senate is up for grabs. It's very closely divided. The Montana Senate seat is basically one of Republicans' best pickup opportunities. They have Jon Tester is the incumbent there. He's a very vulnerable incumbent, and he is running against Mr. Sheehy, who is trying to take him out of that seat. It's expected that Native American communities are going to play a key role in this race. And again, any small issue in this race is going to be important because the election is so crucial to control of the Senate. So that's absolutely something to keep an eye on come November.
Like you said, Tester is certainly vulnerable. The Hill's Mychael Schnell, congressional reporter at The Hill, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Israel and Hezbollah both pulling back Monday after exchanging a series of strikes over the weekend that threatened an all-out war in the region. The exchange started early Sunday when the Israeli military launched what they described as a preemptive attack against the Lebanon-based militia. IDF leaders say it came after learning Hezbollah had plans to launch missiles and rockets toward Israel. That attack came a short time later. Hezbollah said it was in retaliation for the death of its most senior commander in an Israeli strike last month. At least 3 people were killed in Lebanon. No deaths were reported in Israel. It was one of the largest clashes between the two since the October 7th attacks. Russia responding to Ukraine's recent offensive into Kursk Monday morning by launching a massive missile and drone attack in Ukraine. The attack hit multiple areas across the war-torn country, including the capital city of Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the attack was deadly, but he did not provide specific numbers. He also said it caused significant damage to Ukraine's energy sector. In the wake of the attack, Zelensky is urging the U.S. and its allies to lift a policy that prevents the Ukrainian military from using American-made weapons to strike deep in Russian territory. Massachusetts state officials are warning residents to take precautions due to a heightened risk of mosquito-borne illness. According to the Massachusetts Department of Health, 10 communities across the southeastern part of the state have an elevated risk for Eastern equine encephalitis, or EEE virus. According to the CDC, most people infected do not develop symptoms, but it can turn deadly for those who do become symptomatic. Officials are urging residents to take measures to avoid mosquito bites, like wearing long pants and long sleeves, staying inside during peak mosquito time, and wearing insect repellent. Officials say affected areas will also be sprayed for mosquitoes. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Margaret Chadbourn. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.